Glad to have you back. You're watching Arise Africa. Well, Justice Folashade Ogunbiyi-Giwa of the Federal High Court, Abuja, has ruled that the Independent National Electoral Commission, that's INEC, was wrong to have excluded the candidate of the Social Democratic Party, the SDP, in the November the 16th governorship election in Kogi State, north-central Nigeria.
Indeed, well, governorship candidate of the SDP, Natasha Akpoti, her deputy Adams Khalid and their party, SDP, had dragged the electoral body before the Abuja division of the Federal High Court to challenge their exclusion from the November 16 election in Kogi State. The commission had, in a letter through its chairman, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, written the SDP to inform the party that it has no lawful candidate in the forthcoming governorship poll in Kogi State. The judge says, at best, the commission, being a legal entity, could have approached a court of law to disqualify such candidates deemed not qualified to contest an election. And still talking elections, a chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, has said it is mandatory to deploy smart card readers in the conduct of the November 16 governorship elections in Bayelsa and Kogi states. And at a stakeholders meeting in Yenagoa, the Bayelsa state capital, Professor Yakubu said the smart card readers have been configured and will be added to other sensitive materials and delivered together. He said it is mandatory to use the smart card readers for voter accreditation and authentication. The meeting featured the signing of a peace accord by stakeholders in the presence of the chairman, Traditional Rulers Council of Bayelsa State, King Alfred Diete Spiff, and representatives of the Christian Association of Nigeria and that of the Chief Imam.
By the end of this week. Thereafter, the processes of inspection of the premises of the central bank and deliveries to the local government areas, to the wards and the polling units will commence. And civil society organizations that have accredited observers, the media people like you will all be present to observe the process, as well as party agents. We are fully prepared for that.
75% of Bayelsa State is river. So what is your commission doing for the arrival of materials?
This is not the first time. This is not the first time INEC is conducting elections in Bayelsa. We appreciate the fact that 75% of Bayelsa is water, 25% is land. We have conducted elections before. We know the local government areas, and we have made ample arrangements, not only for land transportation, but also maritime transportation, the boats, and working with the police and other security agencies. We're also going to have gun boats to escort the personnel and materials to those locations. So I'm really prepared in terms of logistics.
At the 2019 election, just a few hours it was postponed. From the information at your table, is there any cause to postpone this?
9 days are firm and fixed. We'll conduct the elections on November 16, 2019.
Okay. Thank you very much.
INEC chairman there, Mahmood Yakubu. Well, the ruling of a Nigerian Federal High Court, which barred the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, from disqualifying candidates from vying for political office, may have added another twist to the conversation on the need for electoral reforms in the country. To look at the various angles of this ruling, we are now being joined from our Rise Abuja studio by a public affairs analyst and associate professor of communication at the Bayes University, Abuja, Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi. Good to have you join us this hour. Going straight into it now.
Good to be here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Now, if INEC is expected to midwife, nurture, and then supervise the process or the guidelines for selecting political party candidates for elections, why shouldn't it be in a position to disqualify them when they are found wanting?
Shade, you know, all these processes, all these institutions, you know, the regulations, you know, and the executionary process can be very complicated sometimes. And sometimes when we see this kind of conflation, we shouldn't really be surprised, really. You know, but you see, INEC is right ethically, INEC is right morally, but ethics and morality are not the same thing in the eyes of the law. You know, the court interpretation would definitely border on technicalities, you know, and it shouldn't be taken as final. So what the court has said, well, it could just be must probably have arisen from some technicalities which are still challengeable. I do not see these as a final word on this subject matter because, like you rightly said, if INEC is the arbiter, if INEC is the umpire, if INEC has the responsibility of scrutinizing candidates' papers, the onus is on them to some extent to ensure that candidates who are not fit, who are not qualified, are not put on the ballot. And if in exercise of their jurisdiction, in exercise of their responsibility, some other body like the judiciary finds it wrong somehow. Okay, they can also come in and put in their word, but the gratifying thing in the circumstances is that it is not a final court, in this matter. It can still be challenged in a higher court. And do not forget the common saying that electoral cases are sui generis. They assume a life of their own. They have their own special character. That's why I believe that it's just a temporary setback, as it were. It's a temporary complication, like we're analyzing, and I see it being resolved as quickly as possible. It's not one that can hold. It's not one that can stand, because INEC has a statutory, moral, ethical responsibility which they have to carry out. And ordinarily, we do not expect any other body, even if it is the judiciary, even if it is the sanctuary of the law court, which we hold in high esteem, to challenge the right of the electoral body, as it were.
Well, Dr. Adeniyi, there have been several recommendations on electoral reforms in Nigeria. In your considered opinion, does this judgment in any way sit well with any of the recommendations of the Justice Uwais panel, particularly on electoral reforms?
Yeah, we have been hearing about reforms since 1999, after the dawn of democracy, and we're still going to continue to hear it. But the argument has always been that we can continue reforms ad infinitum if the actors in the process are not determined, if they are not conscientious, if they are not committed to the execution or to the realization of a value-laden process. There's no kind of reform that you can bring on board that will not be circumvented or that will not be perverted. So we have laws, we have regulations that are more than good enough for us to see that we witness free, fair, transparent, and even credible election. But the thing is the operation. The thing is actually the operators. They are less than committed. They are less than salutary about their commitment to the process, and that's why we're having all these constant calls, really, because the laws as they are not really bad. Yes. There's no way, of course we know lawyers are very smart, there's no way you can perfect the laws that they cannot also be circumvented in a way. What we need really, I think, is some level of value orientation to make us just accept what we have and make the best out of it in the circumstance this way.
And Dr. Adeniyi, beyond next week's governorship elections in Bayelsa as well as Kogi states, in what ways would you say the application or the implementation of this ruling can impact on a wider context of a pan-Nigeria election?
Yeah, well, I think looking at it from a bigger picture, it just says that there are stages in the electoral process. There's a pre-election process, the election itself, and a post-election process. In our own kind of system, the post-election process is leading with tribunalization. In the case of Kogi and Bayelsa, what we're witnessing now is a pre-election process. Unfortunately, we are moving what we used to see in the post-election process into the pre-election process with back and forth, with resort to the court. It's okay, we cannot stop people from exercising their right, but the argument here is that, what are you really going to court for? Are you going to court because you think that the people actually need you to step into the court, or you think that, without you, the state or the country as a whole will not survive? What is the motivation, really? Is it just service to the people, or some kind of ego chasing, or is it or out of pride and prestige? Those are the questions we need to be asking ourselves. So on a larger scale, we know that there are stages in the electoral process. We need to follow them. We have the right, but in following these stages, in following these steps, how well-meaning are we towards the collective good? Is it just because we are concerned about self-aggrandizement, or are we concerned essentially about the public good, which should actually be the ordinary drive, which should actually be the focus of our politicians, the motivation, really. But to what extent are they motivated? That's where I still think we have questions to pose to them.
Well, indeed, I know you're a keen watcher of the elections. What have you observed in the build-up to these elections in Kogi and Bayelsa states? And do you have predictions? Is this a two-horse race between the two leading parties in both states?
Yeah, definitely. It's even at the national level, it's always a two-horse race, and at the state level, Kogi, Bayelsa, that is in focus, I don't expect it to be less so. You know, the PDP and the APC are holding sway in those states, you know. But what I expected really is for INEC, you know, to have learned from their mistakes in the general election and use those learnings to improve on the processes and procedures of Kogi and Bayelsa election. I'm not sure if we are expecting a flaw-free election as much as possible. There are tensions all over the place. Even INEC chairman has alluded to it. But the onus is on INEC to give us a free, fair, and credible election in those states, especially as we are preparing for other off-cycle and off-season elections ahead of the general elections, you know. It's not enough for us to sing sweet songs of redemption, sweet songs of transparency before every election, but elections will come, we'll still see crisis, we'll still see all those shenanigans and all such downsides that we'll keep identifying. And again, we will not do anything about it before another election. So we'll just keep moving in cycles, taking two steps backward and two steps forward and one step backward. I think the INEC, as it were, you know, they have done their bits. You know, we'll see them talking every day in the media, you know, letting us know that they are very ready. You know, but then we will not be convinced until they can deliver, a gratifying election at the end of the day. You know, we do not expect anything less from them, and the onus is on them. The ball is in their court to give us this kind of election, Adesua and Shade.
Dr. Adeniyi, we're going to ask you about what you feel about staggered elections, but we don't have time now. Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi, thank you for joining us this hour, Public Affairs Analyst and Associate Professor of Communication at the Bayes University, Abuja. Thank you for being with us.